Assalamualaikum and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle HISC Seerah session 133, where we're carrying on with what happened when the Prophet ﷺ came back from Banu Mustaliq. So this is the sort of third session. So just a quick recap, just to put things into context, because it's very important. Because inshallah, over the next 2 or 3 sessions, we'll talk, inshallah, about the ifk or the slander of our mother Aisha'a, radiallahu anha. So just a quick recap, and it will be quick, as I say. So then we can sort of focus on the story, inshallah. And it's important because it sets the context for the slander. So just going back a few sessions, there's the Battle of the Ditch. Following the Battle of the Ditch, there was Banu Qurayza and expelling Banu Qurayza. During the Battle of the Ditch, the Prophet ﷺ was approached by Usama bin Zayd, saying, "Look, I want to divorce Zainab." The Prophet ﷺ said, not yet, now's not the right time. But then after some time, shortly after the Battle of the Ditch or Banu Qurayza, they divorced. Then revelation came from Prophet ﷺ commanding him to marry Zainab. Then the hypocrites pounced on that as a way of attacking the Prophet ﷺ and his morality, his norms, attacking Islam. And obviously, Abdullah ibn Ubai, as leader of the hypocrites, he was at the forefront of spreading those rumours, but in a very clever way. Then news received, the Prophet received news that Banu Mustaliq were going to attack the Prophet in Medina, and they were led by a chief called Al-Harith bin Dirar, and he was gathering forces to attack the Prophet. So the Prophet he then sent Buraidah to gain some intel, confirm the rumours, which he did. And then the Prophet gathered 700 Sahabi, and these include, or 700 in the army, which included lots of munafiqeen, including Abdullah ibn Ubai. And this was a sort of a quick surprise counter-offensive, and the Muslims, they got there by stealth. They weren't discovered. They attacked and routed the army of Al-Harith bin Dirar in Banu Mustaliq. And they took a lot of spoils together. One of the Sahabi was accidentally killed in friendly fire. We talked about Hisham bin Zababa and his brother, claimed to be a Muslim, got the blood money, then killed the killer of Hisham, and then fled. And we'll come back to that story in the conquest of Makkah. And then amongst the spoils of war, Juwayriya bint al-Harith, the daughter of the chief, she was given to one of the Sahabi, and then she wanted to enter into a contract to negotiate her freedom, and she's going around asking for support and money for that. She comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ sees that. He offers to marry Juwayriya, and consequently and to free her as the meher. And consequently, all of the tribe, they were then freed, because the Sahabi didn't want to have relatives of Juwayriya being their slaves, so they freed everyone. And then when Al-Harith came back, he found that for the ransom, Juwayriya decided to stay, and then he became a Muslim and was reappointed chief of the tribe and went back. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he's returning victorious from Banu Mustaliq, and during this battle, the rules about tayammum are revealed. Other fiqh issues are revealed, and we discuss those. And then as they're coming back, the Muhajir and the Ansar, they start to quarrel. Two people at a well, pushing and shoving each other. One Muhajir calls, one was paid by the Muhajir, so allied to the Muhajir, he calls the Muhajir and then the other Ansari one calls his group, and they start fighting amongst each other. And then again, we talked about the evils of nationalism, tribalism, these Jahiliyyah ideas. The Prophet, he calmed that down, and then Abdullah ibn Ubai, he hears of this story once things have calmed down, and then his hatred for Islam comes even more to the fore, and he criticizes Islam and the Prophet and describes the Muslims as dogs, saying that when we return to Medina, the more mighty will expel the lower people. And he used an Arab phrase where if you fatten your dog, it will come back and bite you or eat you. And so he said that in a public gathering amongst the Khazraj. There was a youngster there called Zayd bin Arqam. He hears this and he's shocked. How can Abdullah ibn Ubai, the chief, say something like this? Went running to his uncle, and then both of them went to the Prophet ﷺ and explained this. Abdullah ibn Ubai, he hears about this, that he's been found out. He rushes back to the Prophet ﷺ and swears. He denies all of these claims. And then just to stop all this tittle-tattle that's going to happen within the army, the Prophet ﷺ immediately orders the army to march. So they gather up all their stuff hastily, and they march continuously for the rest of the day. Obviously, they break for prayers. They march continuously all night till Fajr, break for prayers, and then they carry on marching until that the sun is high in the sky. So again, nearly 24 hours. Then they stop, and they camp, and they all fall asleep, obviously. And then it's when they're all, and this is they're sort of a day or so outside of Medina, and when they're ordered to regroup and go towards Medina, this is when the incident of the if happens. But in the meantime, as they're marching back, all this argumentations happen, and process of ordering them to march back. Allah exposes Abdullah ibn Ubai, the leader of the hypocrites. Okay, and we talked about the verses of the Qur'an which explicitly, show how corrupt Abdullah ibn Ubai was, and quoting what he said, and the Prophet ﷺ then went back and said to the youngster Zayd bin Arqam, your ears have heard you correctly. Allah's verified that truth. So the hypocrites spared Abdullah ibn Ubai. Umar ibn al-Khattab obviously said, let me chop his head off. The Prophet says, no, not yet. And Abdullah ibn Ubai's own son, Abdullah, his name is Abdullah ibn Ubai, he comes to the Prophet and says, look, I hear you want to kill my father, let me do it. So all in all, this is a really terrible day for Abdullah ibn Ubai. A lot of the people who were loyal to him, even though there's some question marks about his loyalty to Islam, a lot of people actually, following these verses, they turn on Abdullah ibn Ubai, and they start to, renounce their hypocrisy. So this is a really, bad situation for Abdullah Ubai, and he's seething with all this, and he's been exposed by Allah, for goodness sake, and there's no way around that. And some of the lessons we talked about were the principal lessons, the dangers of tribalism, of nationalism, being wary of people who want to cause fitna in the ummah. And again, these could be people with wealth, power, or fame. They see Islam or Muslim or the da'i, the carrier of Islam, and they see them as being a threat to their wealth, their power, their fame, and they will do anything to counter that, and it colours their vision of the world. But yet, those of us who are on the receiving end of their fury, of their tribalism, of their gossip, we need to be soft and gentle with these people, like Prophet ﷺ was with Abdullah ibn Ubai. So that's the backdrop. Abdullah ibn Ubai, he's essentially been exposed as a munafiq. Okay, Surah Munafiqun was revealed. So this is testimony of the Qur'an. So they're camped and they're all being really tied, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he gets them to he announces, they've all had a rest. Let's gather everything and let's head back to Medina. So that's the story, where the story starts of the ifk of Aisha. And again, this was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, where he wouldn't walk straight into Medina. He would camp outside, send criers, or people would be alerted that they camped outside, so that people of Medina can get ready for the army coming back in. So this is just the normal thing as it happens, and so this is how it's playing out. And the story, it's in Sahih Bukhari and it's in Muslim. It's in all the books of Seerah, because it's a really important story. There's some controversy. We talked before about whether it happened before the Battle of the Ditch or after the Battle of the Ditch. But anyway, some of the books put it here. And the great thing about the story of the ifk is that we've got the first-hand narration, where Aisha, she narrates this in the first person. And it's a very lengthy hadith, and so we'll go through it as much as we can. It's a slander, and a slander essentially is an act or crime of making a false spoken statement damaging a person's reputation. Essentially, it's defamation of character. It's in the spoken word as opposed to the written form, which this law is taken as libel, but when it's spoken, it's slander. So making a false statement against someone to damage their reputation. And again, a lot of us have been on the wrong end of that, and so there are things for us to learn in terms of how we should, bear patience through this. And again, what better way than to look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ to see how the community, how the Prophet ﷺ, and how those who were subject to this slander, how they acted and reacted in that situation. And again, it's the mother of the believers in this instance. Now she's telling this story, and it's about a sacred bond between husband and wife. It's the honor and sanctity of marriage, but it just shows how desperate Abdullah ibn Ubai and the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, were, that they in order to get the Prophet, they went after the wife and the family of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And again, you see that constantly amongst the community today, where people, they can't argue about the issues. They go to character assassination of the individual, of the da'i, of the leaders. And they can't do that. They start targeting the family of the da'i, the wife or the children or whatever. And it's a common phenomenon. And again, we can see this, and there's a lot of lessons from this story for us. And again, that's what Allah says, don't think, in the Qur'an translation, don't think this is bad, but good for you. But we've got these things, recounted in clear detail in the Qur'an. So Aisha, she recounts a long hadith, and she starts by saying the Prophet ﷺ would normally cast lots amongst his wives whenever he went on a long journey, and this is the fairest way of doing it. So whoever's married at the time, you just cast lots, draw the long straw, as it were. So rather than having a rota, because then that's not sort of fair on everyone, it's just this is the fairest way to do it in that situation, where the Prophet is marrying different people at different times. So going on a long journey, he would cast lots amongst his wives, and one of them would come along. And so on this occasion, it was Aisha. And again, the Prophet wouldn't always take his wives with him on for a battle, but this was a fairly certain win, obviously by the permission of Allah. But so there was a low chance of things going bad. So again, he'd taken Aisha with him, and so she says the Prophet would cast lots whenever he would go on a long journey like this. My name came up, so I travelled with the Prophet and this was after the verses of hijab were revealed. And again, we talked about this with the marriage of the Prophet with Zainab bint Jash, and that's when the verses of hijab were revealed. And so what she's explaining, she's setting the context. So, this is years later, she's describing this story, and she's explaining everything away. So she's providing the context and making excuses for people. So she's saying, look, this was after the verses of hijab. So, things that you can see happening, you've got to put it into that context. And she said, therefore, I would travel in a Howdah, right? Which is, we've seen them sort of in sort of your old, paintings or some of your period films. It's like a box or a cabin or a tent that you put on top of a camel or an elephant or a large traveling animal. And it's completely covered, so it's like a cabin. It's got curtains on, and it's normally carried by 4 or more men. So she's saying that I would be normally traveling like that, and the fact that this was after the verses of hijab were revealed with regards to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. And when we talk about hijab, it's not what we term in our vernacular hijab. Hijab now means the headscarf. In those terms, it was a separation. Hijab, we talk about the difference between the linguistic and the shari and the literal meaning of words. In this context, it's a barrier between the wives of the Prophet ﷺ and the rest of the community. So the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, once the verses were revealed, they weren't allowed to show their faces except to their mihram. And so whenever people needed to address the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they would do it from behind a veil or a hijab. And again, we talked before when the Prophet ﷺ went on the Isra wal Miraj, in the Miraj, where he has audience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is behind a veil of light. So this is just talking about that separation. So she's saying that I was young and I was thin. She was a youngster at the time, in the late teens or early 20s, or mid-teens, depending on different interpretations of her age. But she wasn't, she was very light. So she's basically saying, like, if she was sat in the Howdah, the people carrying it wouldn't know if she was in or not. And there's 4 of them carrying it, so she's trying to set the scene for explaining what happens. So saying, look, this was before the verses of hijab were revealed. And again, the word for the term Allah uses in the Qur'an for the scarf is the khimar, right? And Allah also talks about the jilbab in the Qur'an, right? So in translation, Allah says, when you wear your headscarf, your khimar, cover up, your bosom or your chest. And another verse, tell your wives and your daughters and your believing women that they should cover themselves with a jilbab. So these are sort of the different terms used, but we don't want to go into that. But she's basically saying that there's a veil, so people didn't know that whether or not she was in the Howdah. And so she says, after the expedition finished, we were on our way back. We've talked about that. We set the scene. And the Prophet gave orders to camp outside Medina, and we explained the reason for that. And contextually, the Munafiqun, they're at a loss. They've been exposed, and this is a terrible, terrible situation for them. And this is, the previous night before they camped. They've been marching all day and night. Is the night when Surah Munafiqun has been revealed and they've been exposed. So Aisha, she continues. So when the orders were given for the army to camp, I stood up and I walked away from the army to relieve myself. So when the orders were given to decamp, so the Prophet have camped there, and the Prophet said, look, let's march into Medina. And she says, when the orders were given, I stood up and walked away from the army to relieve myself, in the distance in the bushes. And then on the way back, I felt my chest and my necklace. She had an onyx necklace, had broken. Again, onyx, it can be, it's just it's not even a semi-precious stone, and some say this was given to her as a gift from a friend or from the Prophet ﷺ. But anyway, it had sentimental value to her. So she's looking for a necklace and she can't find it on her chest, so it's been broken. So she's panicked. And then she says, I panicked and I went back to find it. So she has to retrace her steps, right? And she says, I spent a long time trying to find it. So she's retracing her steps to when she went. And she's looking at the floor and then where she was, and she's looking everywhere and she can't find it. And she spent a lot of time looking for it. So it shows how much, this jewelry meant to her. And it's not some sort of big bling jewelry. It's just, plain onyx, polished stone, silicate material. So in the meantime, the army, they're tired from walking all day and all night. They've had a bit of rest, and they're really looking forward to going back to Medina. So they gather up their things and they quickly move on. And as they're moving on, the four people who are assigned to look after the Howdah, they pick up the Howdah and they don't think much of it, and they just put it on the camel and they move off. And Aisha, she's recounting this hadith and she's making an excuse for these people and said, look, I myself was a young girl and I was very light, I was very thin, scrawly. So when they picked up the Howdah, they didn't realize that I was not in it. So they said, give them, let them off. It's not their fault. There's four of them. They're picking up the Howdah, and I'm not in there, but I'm light, so they wouldn't necessarily know if I was in there or not. And again, because of the rules of hijab and the protocol associated with it, they're not going to say, "Are you in there? Is everything okay?" It's just a very dignified, as I say, protocol that they just sort of they assume she's in there. They've got no reason to assume she's not in there. They didn't see her go and leave. So they just pick it up, put it on the camel, and they make their way back. So she says that when I returned to the camp, she hadn't found her necklace. She spent a lot of time looking for it. She said not a single person was in sight. And then where the camel was, that's where she found a necklace. So she'd dropped her necklace where the Howdah and the camel was. That's where she found it. And obviously she wasn't going to find it where she was looking for, retracing her steps. Now everyone's gone and she doesn't know what to do. She's a lady alone in the desert outside Medina. She's not going to walk. So she says, look, I stayed in my place and I assumed that they will soon realize that I'm missing and they will come back for me. So I just sat down there and I fell asleep. And again, she's later on justifying that these guys, they probably didn't realize I was missing because I'm I was very light. But at the time, she's a bit panicked. She's thinking, well, they must realize that I'm not there. Surely they'll come back. So that's what she says. She's alone in the desert. She's not got anything with her. There's no food, there's no water. She's so she just assumes that it's not going to be a long time. They're going to come back, and she just falls asleep. And then she's waken up. She's startled by a voice that's coming that says, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah." Right? So she narrates this. I woke up when I heard a man say, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah," and this was Safwan bin Muattal. Right? And she explains this again in detail for the audience. And the way she's explaining the hadith, she's offsetting a lot of questions people might have. So she goes, Safwan bin Muattal, he's a Badriun, he's a Muhajir from Makkah, fought in the Battle of Badr, and goes, he had seen me before the verses of hijab came down, so he recognized me. Right? So when I woke up and I saw him, I just covered my face with my jilbab. Now there's no conversation that happens between them, so all that Safwan says, that's the only thing he says, right? Well, not the only thing he says. What is the jewel of the Prophet doing here, right? And the other beautiful thing about what Safwan exclaimed there, is that instantly, as a reflex, he says la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, right? He didn't curse. He didn't swear on anything else. He didn't take the name of another prophet that we find in our community in the UK. He instantly praised Allah. And again, and we talked about this before in the Battle of Uhud, where the Prophet ﷺ was saying to one of the Sahabi who had his fingers chopped off, who basically said, "Ouch!" Right? He said, "Look, if you just at that moment in time, reflexly, if you'd said Bismillah or praised Allah, right, you would have been risen to the heavens." Right? So again, this is something for us to learn, that anything happens, good and especially bad, or a surprise, we should program our minds and our brains to praise Allah, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, right? All of these things, if they happen by reflex, Allah is so happy with us. And this is what happened on this occasion. So, we all need to work on ourselves, when we're out and about, or in the car, or playing sports. Anything happens, or you trip, you stub your toe, praise Allah, remember Allah, have the sweetness or the wetness of dhikr on our tongues all the time. So that's what happened with Safwan ibn Muattal. And she goes, "Look, I swear by Allah, he did not speak to me one word after that. All he did was he lowered his camel, walked away, turned his back and walked away. And then she got on the camel, and then sort of without looking back, he took the camel and they just walked, and he guided it all the way back to Medina, right? And again, it shows the character of the type of person he was. He was unmarried, and he was a dignified Sahabi, right? And then they're walking on the camel, and then sort of straggling right at the back is Abdullah ibn Ubai. And then, this is the morning after the night when the Qur'an is revealed. He is the leader of the hypocrites. He is a hypocrite, right? And all of the things that go with hypocrisy. So he sees that, and then he thinks of getting his revenge on the Prophet ﷺ and on the Muslims. I mean, he is just completely visceral hatred with rage at this point in time. His own son is challenging him, saying, "Look, I'm not going to let you into Medina until the Prophet says you're allowed to come into Medina, right? So Safwan leading Aisha on the camel, he sees that because he's right at the back, and then he starts spreading the rumors. But Aisha, she didn't realize at the time, and she's narrating this. When I came to Medina, thought nothing of it. I was back on the camel. I fell sick for a whole month, and I did not hear anything. Right? And again, this compounds the problem: the fact that she's fallen ill, and then rumors are starting to spread, and she's got no way of defending herself because she's not aware of the rumors. And then in that whole month, the Prophet ﷺ not able to counter the rumors because he's not going to confront her while she's ill. He's not going to be able to talk about this while she's ill. So he's having to just sit and listen to these rumors being spread throughout Medina, and he can't do anything. But obviously it affects him, right? And we'll talk about how it affected him, because he's a little bit distant from Aisha then. It's just natural, right? He's hearing these things about his wife. He knows they're not true, but subliminally he modifies his behavior, right? And this is the greatest of humans, right? So she said, look, came back to Medina, I fell sick for a whole month, and I didn't hear anything else about the rumors. And again, the books of Seerah, they don't actually in any detail talk about the slander. What was the content of the slander? We don't know. We just know that people were slandering Aisha, and we can guess what it's about. She's coming back on Safwan's camel, a few minutes late. So people will put 2 and 2 together to get 644. So but throughout the whole hadith and throughout all the books of Seerah, no one actually goes explains what the slander was. But we can imagine how low Abdullah ibn Ubai would be in terms of what he's saying about what happened. And again, it just shows the adab of the Sahabi and the respect they had for the Prophet and for Aisha, that they don't refer to that. They just said that it's the slander, and she doesn't. When she's recounting it, she herself doesn't say what the rumors were. She just says that the rumors spread, and when she heard the rumors, she was aghast, right? So rumors are being spread. This is this is trending in Medina. This is hashtag did you hear type stuff, and really, and there's no way of countering it. There's no counter to all these salacious rumors, right? Because Aisha, she's in, right? And some people would then redouble their things when you're out of the picture. You're not there to defend yourself, right? Or unable to defend yourself. People go to town even more. This is what happened. And then she carries on. Look, I returned home and thought nothing of it. I felt sick with a fever and spent an entire month in bed. And no one told me the rumors had spread like this throughout Medina. I was completely unaware is what she's saying. And the only thing that brought some doubt to me, or something that's sort of niggling at her, which is the only thing that brought some doubt to me, was that the Prophet ﷺ, he was not open with me as he normally was. So normally he's very loving and tender and caring towards her. But she noticed actually in the interaction of the Prophet ﷺ to her when she's ill is quite formal. He would come in and ask the mother of Aisha, how's she doing, right? And so she said, well, this is a bit unusual. So that's what she talks about. And then she said, look, when she got well, she says that I went to relieve myself with Mustaliq, who is her aunt. She's Aisha, obviously the daughter of Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's sister, Mustaliq, she said, look, she said we exited our and went houses, and we went towards an area where we would relieve ourselves, and we would only go to this area once every few days because we were of the Arabs, and this was before the time where people built toilets inside their houses, and we found that disgusting, right? Again, you think for the Arabs, later on when wealth had come to the Ummah, they started to have sanitation and build toilets inside the house. But if you rewind a bit before that, it's a disgusting notion having a toilet within the house, So she said, look, and we used to go every few days. They didn't used to eat much, and she said, like, she was a thin, scraggly type of person, so every few days they would go and relieve themselves. So she goes with Mistah, and on the way, she said, look, we didn't have toilets in our house. We Arabs hated this. And then Mistah, she trips over her own gown, and she sort of stumbles, and then, as we talked about Safwan, instantly, saying La hawla wala quwwata illa billah. Here, Mistah, when she trips up, she instantly, sort of as a reflex, curses her own son. And then Aisha, she's going, whoa, to you, how can you say that about your own son, Mistah, when he attended Badr? And she said, look, why are you cursing your own son when your son is a Badriun, right? She doesn't know what's happening. There are three people who were spreading this gossip amongst the Muhajirin, and Mistah, her own son, was one of these. And Mistah says, my dear child, don't you know what's going on? Don't you know what's being said? Aisha goes, no. And then she tells her, and then some say that Aisha basically fainted on the spot, right? And then she's just, wow, people really saying this, right? And Mistah says, you really don't know what's going on, right? And Mistah, she's cursing her own son because her own son is the one who's spreading these things. So Aisha, she says, look, I went back home, and this news made me physically sick and emotionally sick, more sick than I was for the last month. And then she narrates, the Prophet ﷺ entered upon me and asked how I was. Now, he didn't know that I finally found out. So then Aisha, she's asking the Prophet ﷺ for permission to go to her parents' house. So she's staying next to the masjid at this time. She's getting better. She's got better. Prophet ﷺ's coming in to ask how she is, and then she says, I'm better. Do you mind if I go stay with mum and dad? And the Prophet says, of course, that's fine. So we'll finish there. Inshallah, we'll pick up the rest of the story. What happens when she's in her parents' house, Abu Bakr Siddiq's house. She's got permission to go there. She leaves straight away, and she goes to find out what's going on. So we'll carry on from her narration in the next session, inshallah. So until then, do remember us in your du'as. Do make dua for the ummah as well, and as I say, do remember us in your du'as. Inshallah, we'll carry on in the next session. So take care. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wa la inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.